Employee contracts bring yet another complication to scheduling your employees. A legally binding complication. Contracts have stipulations which limit an employee's schedulability. Depending on your location, additional labor laws and industry agreements might hamper that schedulability even more. For example, the EU Working Time Directive forces EU member states to guarantee, amongst other things, a minimum daily rest period, a minimum of 11 consecutive hours of rest, and an annual period of paid leave. Let's have a look at the implications of this. There is more to life than just work. To safeguard the well-being of employees, there often is a required minimum time between two shifts. When building a schedule, this needs to be taken into account. This means that if Beth would be assigned 2 shifts close together, this should break a hard constraint and make the schedule infeasible. Like all employees, she's entitled to some time away from work. We all need some downtime, especially to get some time away from certain colleagues. Not naming any names, you know who you are. Laws and regulations often specify a maximum number of consecutive days an employee can work before they need a full day of rest. For many industries, this is capped at 6 consecutive days, but in some cases, such as working in an offshore oil rig, this might be a lot higher. When building a schedule, these limits on consecutive days can be a bit tricky. For example, if employees can only work 2 days in a row in the ICU, then this already creates a rigid schedule with limited room for flexibility. At the same time, it may also be important to specify a minimum number of consecutive working days. Having an employee return to work for just 1 day, only to immediately have another day off, isn't efficient or practical. This kind of scheduling can be very disruptive, making it harder to fully disconnect during their days off and killing any real sense of work-life balance. Ironically, the person with the worst work-life balance is probably the one who has to manually create all these schedules with all these constraints. Certain work aspects may have both minimum and maximum limits per day, week or month. These aspects include things such as working hours, locations, and shift types. For example, when Dave's contract stipulates that he has to work 8 hours a day, then the schedule shouldn't assign him shifts which exceed that time. To enable this, we introduce a rule which states that the maximum number of hours each day should be 8. Most of the time, there are multiple rules at work. Dave's contract also has a clause which limits his time to 40 hours a week. This is also expressed as a rule, although with a different effective duration. Rule limitations might not always apply to all shifts. On-call shifts are a typical example where the time someone is on call is much larger than a regular shift. To handle these situations, we should filter the on-call shifts out of the previous examples so they're not counted towards those rules. If the maximum number of on-call hours are also contractually set, then we might include an additional rule for the on-call shifts. While many contract-based rules are strict, this period rule mechanism can also be used to express preferences. For example, if we want to prevent all off-site location shifts from being assigned to a single person, we can introduce a preferred rule. Violating this rule won't impact feasibility, but it will improve the quality of the schedule. As the saying goes, rules are meant to be broken, just not these ones. Managing contractual scheduling constraints for a single employee is already challenging. Doing so manually each week for dozens or hundreds of employees is nearly impossible. And we've only covered some of the constraints in this video. There will be a few more that we'll discuss in the next video. We realize that scheduling employees with all these constraints to take into account gets overwhelming. This is why we've packaged our Planning AI expertise in easy-to-consume REST APIs. With built-in support for period rules, consecutive days, time between shifts, and many more constraints, our employee shift scheduling API can create your schedule in no time. Easy as that. Try it out yourself on Timefold.ai.